The day my mother put a price on my head, I was standing in the kitchen making her tea. I didn't know what was happening at first. I just heard voices, low, urgent, the kind of voices adults use when they don't want children to understand. I was 19, not a child, but my mother had always treated the truth like something I wasn't old enough to handle. I set the kettle down quietly and stood near the hallway, listening. "She's a good girl," my mother was saying. "Educated. Healthy. No problems." A man's voice replied. "And she agrees to this?" A pause. A pause that lasted exactly long enough to tell me everything. "She will," my mother said. I walked back into the kitchen, poured the tea down the drain, and sat on the floor with my back against the cabinet. My hands were completely still. My mind was completely blank. And somewhere deep inside me, something that had been fragile for a very long time finally, quietly broke. My name is Layla Marcos. I grew up in a small house on the edge of Millfield, Ohio, the kind of town that appears on maps but not in conversations. My mother, Rosa, was a woman who had once been beautiful and knew it, and spent the rest of her life mourning the opportunities that beauty hadn't delivered. My father died when I was 11, a heart attack, sudden and without warning, and after that, everything in our house shifted in ways I didn't fully understand until I was much older. My mother grieved. Then she gambled. Then she borrowed. Then she gambled again. By the time I was 16, we had lost the car. By 18, we were 3 months behind on rent every single month. By 19, my mother owed money to people who didn't send politely worded letters as reminders. I worked. I worked constantly, waitressing, tutoring, cleaning offices on weekends. I handed most of my paycheck to my mother without being asked because I knew what happened when the men knocked on the door and she didn't have anything to give them. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself things would get better. I told myself my mother loved me and that love, even imperfect love, meant she would never cross a line that couldn't be uncrossed. I was wrong about that last part. His name was Dario Kesh. He was 47 years old, owned 3 import businesses, and had a reputation in certain circles for solving problems in ways that didn't involve lawyers or paperwork. He wasn't violent, not exactly. He was the kind of man who made offers that were difficult to refuse, and he had learned over many years that everyone had a number. My mother's number, it turned out, was $40,000. That was what she owed. That was what Dario was holding over her. And that was what she had agreed to erase, in exchange for me. Not as a wife. Not with any pretense of dignity. As what he called an arrangement. I would work in his household, be available when needed, and in return my mother's debts would be cleared and she would receive a monthly sum that would keep her comfortable. I found all of this out not from my mother, but from a folder I found in her bedroom 2 days after I overheard that conversation. She had left it carelessly on her dresser, contract papers, amounts, dates, signatures. My mother had already signed. There was a blank line where my signature was supposed to go. She had signed before she told me. She had assumed I would follow. I sat on her bed for a long time holding those papers. Then I folded them carefully, put them in the pocket of my jacket, and walked out of the house. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't be inside those walls for one more minute. The house next door had been empty for 8 months. It was the nicest house on our street, which wasn't saying much, but it stood out. Brick exterior, clean windows, a garden that someone had clearly cared for at some point and that had gone slightly wild in the absence of attention. A sold sign had gone up 3 weeks earlier, and I had watched the moving trucks come and go from my bedroom window without much interest. I ended up on the low wall that separated our properties because it was the closest flat surface and my legs had stopped working properly somewhere between my mother's bedroom and the front door. I sat there in the cold with those papers in my pocket and I did something I hadn't done in a very long time. I cried. Not politely. Not quietly. I cried the way you cry when you've been holding something so heavy for so long that your arms finally just give out completely. I didn't hear the door open. I didn't hear footsteps. I just suddenly became aware that someone was standing a few feet away, and I looked up, and there was a man watching me with an expression that wasn't pity and wasn't curiosity, it was something quieter than either of those things. He was tall, perhaps 50, with dark eyes and the kind of face that had clearly been through its own version of difficult. He was holding 2 cups of coffee. He held one out toward me without saying anything. I stared at it. "It's just coffee," he said. "No obligation." I took it. We sat in silence for a while, me on the wall, him on the steps of his front porch. The coffee was good. Better than anything I'd made in months. "You want to talk about it?" he said eventually. "No," I said. He nodded. "Okay." And he just sat there. Not pushing. Not performing concern. Just present. After about 10 minutes, I pulled the papers out of my pocket and held them out to him. I don't know why. I think I just needed someone else to see them. To confirm that they were real and I hadn't imagined the whole thing. He took them. Read them slowly. His expression didn't change dramatically, just a slight tightening around the eyes, the kind of shift that happens when someone encounters something they recognize as deeply wrong. He handed them back. How old are you? He asked. 19. Do you have anywhere to go? I shook my head. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, my name is Nathan Hale. I just moved in. And I have 6 empty bedrooms and no intention of letting you go back in that house tonight. I should have been more cautious. I know that. A stranger, a big house, an offer that seemed too simple, every alarm should have been ringing. But I was 19 and exhausted and I had just discovered that the one person in the world who was supposed to protect me had tried to sell me, and Nathan Hale had a face that made you feel, instinctively, that he wasn't going to hurt you. Sometimes instincts are wrong. Mine wasn't. He showed me to a room on the 2nd floor with clean sheets and a window that looked out over the garden. He didn't ask me questions. He didn't explain himself or his life. He said there was food in the kitchen, the bathroom was down the hall, and if I needed anything I should knock. Then he left me alone. I lay on that bed fully dressed and stared at the ceiling for 3 hours. Then I slept for 11 hours straight, the deepest sleep I had in years. Over the following days, I learned things about Nathan Hale in pieces, the way you learn things about quiet people, not because they tell you, but because the details accumulate around them. He had built a logistics company from nothing, starting at 23 with 1 truck and a contract he'd won by sheer persistence. By 35, Hale Logistics operated in 12 states. By 45, it had expanded internationally and been acquired for a number that I only found out later from a news article I stumbled across, a number that had 9 digits. He had been married once. His wife had died 4 years ago, cancer, swift and terrible. He had no children. He had moved to Millfield, of all places, because he had grown up 40 miles east of here and wanted, in his own words, to remember what quiet felt like. He didn't talk about any of this himself. What he did do was make coffee every morning, tend to the overgrown garden in the afternoons, and treat me with a straightforward decency that I had genuinely forgotten existed. I helped around the house, not because he asked, but because I needed to do something with my hands. I cooked sometimes. I helped sort through boxes he hadn't unpacked. We talked in the evenings, carefully at first, then more easily, the way conversations open up when 2 people are both, in their own ways, a little bit lonely. My mother called 7 times in the first 3 days. I didn't answer. On the 4th day, she came to the door. Nathan answered it. I stood at the top of the stairs listening. I'm looking for my daughter, my mother said. Her voice had that particular texture it got when she was performing, warm and worried for whoever was watching. She's here, Nathan said. She's safe. I need to speak with her. She knows you're here. When she wants to speak with you, she will. A pause. Who are you? What right do you have to? I'm her neighbor, Nathan said simply. And she's an adult who made a choice. Have a good evening, Ms. Marcos. He closed the door. I sat down on the top stair and pressed my forehead against the banister and felt something in my chest loosen, just slightly, just enough. Dario Kesh came on a Tuesday. I saw his car from the kitchen window, black, expensive, idling at the curb with the particular patience of someone who expects to be waited for. He got out slowly, straightened his jacket, and walked toward Nathan's front door like he owned the street. I felt the fear before I felt anything else. A cold, full-body recognition of what this man represented, not just the arrangement, not just my mother's debt, but every moment I had ever felt like something that could be moved around and decided upon by people with more power than me. Then I heard Nathan's voice at the door. Can I help you? Dario explained himself smoothly. He was a family friend, he was concerned about a young woman named Layla, he simply wanted to ensure she was all right. She's all right, Nathan said. I'd like to hear that from her directly. I'm sure you would. Another pause. I moved to the hallway where I could see the door. Dario saw me and his expression shifted, not into anything threatening, but into the particular look of a man recalculating. Layla, he said warmly. Your mother is very worried. I know, I said. There are certain matters we need to discuss. Obligations. There are no obligations, Nathan said. His voice hadn't changed in volume or tone, but something in it had shifted, something that made Dario go very still. The document you're referencing was signed by one party. It's not enforceable. You know that. I know that. And if you come to this house again, my attorneys will know it too. Dario looked at Nathan for a long moment. Something passed between them, the specific communication of 2 men who both understand the language of power and are sizing up how much of it the other one has. Dario left. I stood in the hallway shaking so hard I had to hold the wall. Nathan walked back inside, went to the kitchen, and put the kettle on. How did you know it wasn't enforceable? I asked. I had a lawyer look at it the night you showed it to me, he said. I took photos before I handed it back. I stared at him. You did that without telling me? I didn't want to say anything until I was sure. He turned to look at me. I should have told you sooner. I'm sorry. The legal process that followed was not simple or fast, but it was thorough. Nathan's attorney sent formal notices to Dario Kesh regarding the attempted coercion of a minor. I had been 18 when the arrangement was first discussed, it turned out, which changed the legal weight of everything considerably. Dario's import businesses were already under separate scrutiny for financial irregularities, and the additional attention proved to be more than his carefully constructed reputation could absorb. He settled quietly. The settlement included a formal release of my mother's debt, not as a gift to her, but as part of the legal resolution. She owed nothing. And neither did I. My mother called me the day after the settlement. She didn't apologize, not directly. What she said was, I didn't think it would go that far. As if the distance something travels is what determines whether it's wrong. I listened. I let her finish. Then I said, I know you were desperate, Mom. I know you were scared. But what you did, what you almost did, I can't pretend that's something I can just set down and move on from. Not yet. She was quiet for a long time. I love you, she said finally. I know, I said. I love you too. But love doesn't erase things. It just means you keep going anyway. I hung up and sat with my feelings for a long time after that, not anger exactly, not grief exactly, but the complicated and exhausting work of holding both things at once. The love and the wound. The forgiveness I was working toward and the trust that might never fully come back. Nathan and I never had a dramatic conversation about what we were to each other. Things shifted the way things shift between people who spend real time together, slowly, then undeniably. He asked me once, about 6 months after I had moved in, what I had wanted to do before everything fell apart. I told him I had been accepted to study architecture at a state university 2 years earlier but had deferred and then lost the opportunity when money ran out. He didn't offer to pay. He knew me well enough by then to know how that would land. What he did was connect me with a foundation that offered full scholarships for non-traditional students, women who had faced significant barriers to education. He wrote a letter of support. He told me the rest was up to me. I applied. I submitted a portfolio of sketches I had been making in notebooks since I was 14, buildings, spaces, the way light moved through rooms in ways I couldn't stop noticing. I got in. The morning the acceptance letter arrived, I sat at Nathan's kitchen table and read it 3 times. Then I looked up at him standing by the window with his coffee and his quiet face. I got in, I said. He smiled, the real one, the one that took a moment to arrive but meant everything when it did. Of course you did, he said. I graduated 4 years later at the top of my class. Nathan was in the audience. He didn't sit in the front, he never made himself the center of anything. He was somewhere in the middle, and I found his face when I walked across the stage, and the look on it was the kind of thing you carry with you for the rest of your life. I started my own firm 2 years after graduation. Small at first, just me and one assistant and a drafting table I bought secondhand. Within 3 years we had a team of 8 and projects in 4 states. I got a call from a journalist once who was doing a piece on young women in architecture. She asked me who had been the most significant influence on my career. I thought about Nathan. I thought about his 6 empty bedrooms and his no-obligation coffee and the way he had closed the door on my mother and stood in the hallway with Dario Kesh without raising his voice once. Someone who understood, I said, that the most powerful thing you can do for another person is simply refuse to look away. My mother and I found our way back to each other, slowly, imperfectly, with long silences and careful words and occasional dinners where we talked about small things and let the big things rest. She got help for the gambling. She moved into a smaller apartment and stayed current on her rent. She never directly said she was sorry in the way I had once needed her to, but she showed up in ways she hadn't before, small, consistent, undramatic ways that I came to understand were her version of it. I accepted that. It wasn't everything I had wanted, but it was real. Nathan and I got married on a Saturday in October, quietly, with 12 people, in the garden of the house where I had once sat on a wall and cried until a stranger brought me coffee. The garden was beautiful by then. We had worked on it together over the years, slowly, without any plan, adding things and letting things grow until it became something neither of us had designed but both of us recognized as exactly right. At some point during the evening, I stood at the edge of the garden and looked at the house next door, the house I had grown up in, the house where a frightened woman had made an unforgivable choice out of desperation and love twisted into something unrecognizable. I thought about the girl who had walked out of that house with a folded contract in her pocket and nowhere to go. I thought about how close it had come to going differently. How many ways the story could have ended before it found its way to this garden, this evening, this life. The distance between those two things, the girl on the wall and the woman standing here now, wasn't made of money or luck or a billionaire next door. It was made of one person who refused to look away. And one girl who, despite everything, refused to stop fighting for herself. Those two things together turned out to be enough. They usually are. Whatever wall you're sitting on right now, whatever you're holding in your hands that feels too heavy and too wrong and too much, someone is going to bring you coffee. The question is whether you'll be brave enough to take it.